Hello. Well, we've just come out of the Newsnight studio. It's the five of us actually who were there at the end of the programme. We're continuing. We're continuing the discussion. It got very raucous, but we're here. Got some of your questions, and we're going to put them to David Starkey, Tim Montgomerie, Kate Williams, and Paris Lees. Just not everybody has to answer every question. Keep the questions coming in. Bryn Swatek says, why does a significant and potentially irreversible decision like this not require a 2/3 majority to pass? Do you think that would be a good idea, Kate, a sort of 2/3 majority for a thing like that?
Well, it was very close. I mean, Nigel Farage said if it's 52-48, that's unfinished business on his side, and that's pretty much what we've got, 51.9. So it's very, very close. And essentially, and there's a lot of people who didn't turn out, so you can't say that Britain has voted overwhelmingly to leave.
But would you support actually just saying, look, it takes 65% to make a move like this?
I think. Actually, I would. And I think also what we have to support is to do something as important as this. We need complete honesty and clarity in the campaigns beforehand, because that is one of the problems why I've seen so much voter remorse today. People saying, but I thought we're going to get this for the NHS, I thought it was going to change immigration, I didn't realise the pound was going to plunge. I don't think people really... A lot of people, what they're saying is they didn't understand what's going to happen.
I'm willing to bet that our Remain friends will believe that there should have been a 2/3 majority requirement, and our Leave friends will say that would be anti-democratic. Tim, would that be?
And I think you would be correct in that prediction.
David,
no, I wouldn't. Providing the rules are clear beforehand. If you had all of these reservations about the need for example, very frequently referenda specify what size of turnout you must have, then what kind of majority within it. But sorry, the time to do that is before, not afterwards. And frankly, it's a waste of time. Now, I think the fact that it is such a narrow victory, and it will be quite wrong to ignore that fact, means it will colour the type of negotiations that take place with Europe. It will obviously colour how politicians behave and speak within Britain. So, in one sense, you've already got what you're asking for. All of these points about the young having voted differently, about Scotland, about Manchester, except I don't think Manchester's like London at all. Manchester is simply a Potemkin village.
Try not to insult everybody.
I'm from Oldham and Rochdale. It's a Potemkin village. It is subsidy junkie. Yes.
Well, look, let's take some other. We've got some comments coming in. Shock, says Lima Ahmad. I don't know how that's going to happen in a country like this. Leaving the EU is like jumping off a lifeboat, says Vivian Stiles, and then trying to get back on under better conditions. But people are beginning to catch on. This is quite interesting to this phrase, Article 50, which I don't think anybody had heard out in the real world until this referendum thing. But someone asks, the longer it goes, Steve Greenhalgh, the longer it goes without Article 50 being invoked, does that hint this was just a way of Boris getting the keys to number 10? And we won't actually leave the EU. That's one for you, Tim.
I'm getting a bit tired of all the playing against Boris Johnson. I think he had a genuine doubt about whether to leave the European Union or not, but he eventually settled. A lot of people, I think, were in that position where they weren't sure. But he's been a very disciplined campaigner on this issue now. But there is a real issue, and we've got Matthew Parris writing about this in the Times on Saturday. 3/4 of the House of Commons does not support leave. Mm-hmm. And so you have a verdict now of the people that is presented to Parliament. And what does Parliament do? Does it completely obey the instructions of the British people, or does it exercise, or do MPs exercise their own judgment? And are the instructions of the British people
particularly
clear?
as parliamentary sovereignty was such a big part of the issue for many people.
Also the House of Lords as well. I mean, legally, it's not binding. I mean, no government would ignore it. But we were having a very interesting interview with Jonathan Powell earlier, everyone, when he was saying, oh well, people say that what Boris was thinking was he just wanted to do this as a way of negotiating and having a second referendum. I mean, you never know. But certainly
he made it pretty clear that was not what he wanted.
What we can say about Boris is that he's a man made by referenda, including the mayoral referenda that created that mayoral referendum, and this one.
Can I ask you, Tim? Here's a question. We know that Boris had written 2 versions of his Telegraph article, ready to pull the trigger on when he decided. One was for in, one was for out. Should he publish the one that was... should he tell us what he had written? I would really, really like to see that article.
But I think it was it's been misrepresented, that exercise. This was for him a way of, let's see, I can make the best case for Remain, the best case for leave. And his explanation for that is when he saw both of the arguments next to each other, he thought the argument for leave was much superior.
Why are we focusing on poor Boris? Because after all, because David Cameron is in exactly the same position. David Cameron comes from the Eurosceptic wing of the Tory party. David Cameron has been speaking against, in favour of limiting immigration. In other words, he has done a reverse ferret in the course of all of this, in a way every bit as blatant as we're now suggesting Boris might. And finally, there is no, just one second, there is no way in which this verdict can be ignored by Parliament. We've moved beyond Burke. What Matthew Parris is probably going to invoke is Burke's famous letter to the electors of Bristol saying, I am not your mere delegate, I am a representative. I am there to exercise my brains. I'm afraid the internet, the mass electorate, have fundamentally changed that relationship. It would be political suicide for any politician to take that line.
Let's. We've got one here. I'm going to put this one to you, Paris. Have we been misled? Now, I think you said we have been misled, and I'd like to hear you explain.
Have we been misled? I don't think that we're just leaving the EU. I think we're taking leave of our senses.
What are the lies you think? What is it that you think the Leave campaign did that was actually? I mean, we know the £350 million, but that wasn't the thing that really clinched it, probably.
Okay, so I was back in Nottingham earlier this week, and I spoke to a close friend who told me, I voted by postal vote for Leave because I think countries should be able to run themselves. But they couldn't give me any example of how Europe had stopped Britain from being able to run itself. And I just think the level of debate, public political debate that we've descended to in this country it actually terrifies me, where people are saying, what do experts know? I mean, with all due respect, I don't even know why you guys have been invited here tonight, because we seem to have done away with experts in this country.
And yet at the same time said, we don't like experts, but yet David Beckham knows nothing. So
it's crazy. But we've actually got some really big issues to tackle, like climate change, that there is a scientific consensus on is a really urgent issue, and we're saying, we just don't believe in experts anymore because that doesn't.
You can understand why, though, because you have, it was the Queen's question to the Economist. Remember, she said, "None of you predicted the crash."
But Tim, I'm going to argue with you. Often get things wrong doesn't mean that they have a better batting line.
You realise that these experts have to live in this country too, and their children do. Do give the best advice that we all have to live in this country.
Unless experts can communicate with people in language that they understand and which they care about, they will be disregarded, and they will be correctly disregarded. The trouble is that we have had, and I'm afraid the result exposes this with shattering clarity, we've had a conspiracy of elites. This is a reaction against elites. We've had a conspiracy of elites that have really run politics. The most revealing remark in the last 24 hours has come from Brussels, which is one absolutely affronted diplomat, which said, this was far too important a question to let the people decide. And unfortunately...
Alistair Campbell said that with me on BBC News.
A lot of people have said that.
Alistair Campbell, of course, practiced that.
Okay.
So you were talking about deceit. Well, perhaps you would tell me when we have had an honest political campaign.
No.
Okay, enough. Your question has been put. Kate.
But earlier, Evan, you were talking to Daniel Hannan, and you said, what about this immigration promise? And I think a huge amount of people vote, and with the West Midlands where I'm from, immigration was a key question. They believed it was going to be limited, and as you were discussing, that's simply not the case. So to me, that seems like a bit of blatant lie.
He said clearly that it would be limited. He said that the rules would change. He said that they will be enforced differently, and that leaving the EU will enable one to do precisely that. I mean, again, the question of immigration, there is that famous leak about the Blair government, that people's noses were going to be rubbed in cultural diversity by deliberately increasing immigration. And so that seems to be true. And if you're to understand the degrees of resentment, the degrees of contempt, and again, it's sort of part of a very long story. This goes back to clearly the expenses scandal.
Indeed, in the financial
But
crisis.
what I don't
But,
understand
you're
as
part
a
of a long answer.
historian, I don't understand why you're not drawing parallels between other times where society's been split. We've got an ever-widening gap between the rich and the poor,
That's
and when
rubbish.
that happens,
I don't know anything.
extremism
David,
takes.
rubbish.
No,
Just
David,
society
let
it's
Paris
true.
make a point, and then-
Extremism flourishes when society is unequal. What is this if not extremism? This is a completely radical act to leave the European. No one's ever done this before.
Okay, I'm going to break in because I want us to have a slightly quick fire round here. Okay, just because I want to get through more
we have
questions.
buzzers.
Right, no. Okay, this one's from Michael Sercombe. This is for you, Tim. Has George Osborne completely gone to ground?
Yes, where is he? I have no idea. He's
He's probably
disappeared.
gone to lay down in a dark room for 6 months.
Right. Will Ashfield says, I think this is aimed at you too. Why can't people, and he shouts it in capitals, why can't people just accept the result of the vote?
Because Farage said that he wouldn't accept it if the results had been the same,
do
but the other way
everything that Mr.
around.
Farage
And also, I think we have. I mean, there are many elections I've been very unhappy about, but this one, you see so many people saying, "But I didn't vote for this. This is what I expected, and I expected they believed."
And
were
we
given
don't
the
get to
impression
change
of
it in
something
4
completely
years'
different.
time.
Someone, Opal Donna says we need a new referendum. That, I suppose, is why can't we just accept the result of the
No,
vote?
let's
Someone
have
else
another
says,
Is that a
referendum.
new commission? They generally like us to vote again if we get
I'll
the
get
wrong
out on the
results,
streets and canvass
okay, look,
myself.
here's an interesting, a slightly specific one. I'm going to give it to you, David, but this is quick fire, so nice and short. Tony Baker says, can the EU force us to leave earlier than we want? So basically, we're obviously stringing it out a bit. Can they force us to leave?
My understanding is not. In other words, Article 50, I read it this morning, it is clear it is invoked by the leaving party. And I think any attempt, as it were, twisting that, we could go, if we wanted to, we could go directly to the European Court, and it would, I think, be bound to rule in our favour, legally.
But I think if we want a good relationship with Europe, we need to try and work with them as to the timing. So the fact that they're saying, we want you to do it now, means we've got to listen to them, because if we want some kind of negotiation at the table, we have to pay attention to what they're asking for.
Let me just ask one here. This is, and I'd be interested in your comments on this. It's one referring to how the EU will treat UK nationals on the continent, and I would just add how we treat EU nationals here, as I'm married to one. That matters quite a bit. But what is going to happen? I mean, do we think that there is any chance at all that people who are already resident in one EU country will be?
Well, it'd serve us right, wouldn't it, if they did get rid of us? My granddad lives in Spain, so God knows what's going to happen to him.
Yes, I was just in Spain the other week and talking to so many people there, and they're terrified about their pensions plunging, about their house prices plunging. They were absolutely keen Remainers, but obviously not very many of them. They were interviewing some of them on the news last night. But you're absolutely right. They are in more uncertainty than we
Look
are.
at what we've got. We've got doubt, uncertainty, fear, paranoia, confusion. It's just a complete mess.
Tim, what do you think should happen to the many Poles, the many French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, everybody? What do you think should happen to the ones here?
I think we should accept that people who are already here, and they're welcome, they're making a contribution, I think, and
What
have
about the
reciprocal
ones?
rights.
What about the ones who arrive in the next 2 months?
Well, I don't know how many people will
Well, it could be
arrive.
quite a lot if you hear what
there
you're-
may be large numbers, but I think you have to accept that people who've come under an existing jurisdiction, their rights and privileges need to be respected. I think the difficult area is the one you absolutely spotlight. What happens now between the vote and the leaving?
Yeah. David, go on, you've got an answer to that?
Except presumably, because we've heard that this country is going to down the tubes, all young people will be terrified. Instantly, immigration to Britain will stop. You can just imagine it, can't you? Nobody will ever want to come here again. We'll have no need for a border force because clearly...
Well, I don't. You should know these people weren't
come
always
on,
so keen to be here. Surely you must remember the
try and
70s
smile.
when it was
Try and
horrible.
cope with a joke and try and answer it.
Let's go to
Sorry,
another
I
one.
just thought you were being supercilious.
it is hard to tell sometimes,
You
David.
two should have a
Let-
show.
I think that sounded like a joke.
let me ask another one, because this is an interesting one. This is Tony Trent expresses this fear. His fear is the rise of the far right. Once people realise that leaving the EU wasn't the magic bullet, and that, in fact, it might even make things worse. I wonder whether this is, if you like, something that would lead to people saying we've been taken by right-wingers off the wrong path if they find they regret, have voter remorse, or would they say we need to go one other step to the right to get, satisfaction and better action against immigrants or
Well,
whatever?
the fact is, we've got two types of politicians, ones that bring people together, like Joe Cox, and ones that push people apart. And what you've got with Trump and what you've got with Farage and his friends, they're dividing people. We're not closer as a people. There is not more love in the world now. There is more discord and people turning against each other. And it's genuinely scary. And we do have to guard against this. You should know this better than anybody, that when people start to turn against each other, it can escalate and become very ugly very quickly. And we should always be looking for ways to come together, to be more unified, and to not take the peace that we fought so hard for to be taken for granted.
So that was why you were denouncing the elderly, was it? In such very intemperate terms. To bring people... Yes, you were. You were describing them as being selfish.
David,
David,
I think
you're
the
making
generation above my parents' generation have been incredibly selfish and voted against the interests of the young. And my friend's wife is 80, and she said she wasn't sure which way to vote, but she voted for the ways of what the young wanted, because ultimately they're the people who are going to have to live with that decision.
This is childish.
But it's really interesting.
Well,
It's really
Well, no,
interesting
it's
when you
not
look at
childish. It's childish. It's childish that our grandparents seem to care more, seem to hate immigrants more than they love
Okay,
their
the
grandchildren.
microphone determines who's actually heard. Yeah.
I think the real cause of extremism in Europe aren't the people like Nigel Farage who, I won't defend that poster,
How
that
can you
refugees
how do you
poster.
deny that this is
Can I
like a whipping?
I thought you were against interrupting
Come on.
people
No,
before they hardly
stop arguing
started
about
making
intro.
their
Go on,
point. No, the real cause of extremism in Europe is this pursuit of the political project called the Euro, which has created mass youth unemployment, 50% rates in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy and Greece. Austerity way beyond that's necessary. A European central bank that obsesses over inflation rather than unemployment. It's these institutional mechanisms of this institution that you love, what it has done for young people across the continent. That's why a lot of us, look, I respect the moral power that you have in wanting to stay, but there's a moral power that a lot of us feel, and a lot of moral anger at what the EU has created as well.
Can I ask you
I
then,
think
do
the
you
crash
honestly, in all
created
faith,
austerity.
do you honestly believe that the Leave campaign hasn't whipped up paranoia, fear, hatred against foreign?
Good question.
xenophobia?
Look,
Tim.
I don't think the Leave campaign has been edifying in every sense. I think there's a distinction, of course, between the one led by Boris and the one led by Farage. But look at the other side of the campaign as well. When did you hear a positive case for the EU made by the Remain campaign? It was all about bombs under the economy. It was about World
We're not
War
talking
III.
about that. We're talking about the
No,
Leave campaign.
we're talking about negative.
Okay,
Well,
I'm
you
gonna-
are.
I'm
So-
talking about that poster that Farage was in front of, which wouldn't be so bad if he wasn't there triumphant
Which I will not defend.
today,
Which I
smiling
will
and
not
laughing.
defend.
I mean, is
But,
this okay
you're
now?
a
Is
little
this
bit-
been
Okay, I'm going
legitimised?
to interrupt because it's actually getting up to midnight, and I want to draw this to a close and go home.
We have to leave.
However, I wanted to give the last word to David Starkey. I'd never thought I would say that, but I want to give the last word to David because David, Paris said something very interesting. It was a sort of appeal to the spirit of peace and reconciliation and spreading love and friendship. And I mean, I can see you scoffing already, but there is something in that. There are people who are very good at that, and there are people who do basically spread fear. Do you recognise that? Do you agree with Paris that our politics would be better with a little more love and a little less hate?
Yes, but then of course the love has got to come in both directions, because precisely what has happened is that the kind of politics that she espouses has produced hatred and division.
No, it hasn't.
Of course it has.
She hasn't answered the question.
David, good on you, but you can't win in an argument against the young in the long term. Is all I can say.
Look, I think this has been a very spirited and entertaining discussion. Our editor Ian Katz is actually sitting. He was going to join in this,
He's
but he came
very
in late, and I didn't think he was going to get a word in edgeways. We had a cast of too many gobby people already. So anyway, look, have a very good night. Have a very good night, and thank you all for watching and for your questions. And I'm sorry we didn't get through more. Thanks.